Go ahead and call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock, Monday, October 19th, 2015. If I could have Jeff Walters and the rest stand up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jeff. City Clerk, could I have a roll call?
Councilmember Gallion.
Present.
Councilmember Hundley.
Here.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Here.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor Cook.
Here. City staff?
Yes, Mayor Cook, members of the City Council. I would like at this time to ask that item 8B be removed from your agenda tonight due to an issue that arose today. I would like our city attorney to discuss this with you.
Thank you, City Manager Giovanato. The reason we're bringing this to the council's attention at this early time tonight is because we are recommending this item be dropped. And we're doing that to give those in the audience who may be planning on speaking tonight advance warning that the council may in fact not address this, so that they can leave the chambers if that is all the reason they came to speak to the council about. About midday today, we discovered that the chapter in the municipal code that addresses smoking regulations, which is chapter 7.24, was adopted in 1992 by a vote of the people. It was an initiative measure. And initiatives can't be amended or changed without it going back to the vote and without going back to the voters. And the proposal before you tonight at 8B is to suggest amendments to that chapter for the council itself to undertake and adopt. We need more time to investigate this chapter to see if there are any areas that are not controlled by it. There may be some areas or edifices or products that it does not apply to, in which case those spaces, those empty gaps, the council would be entitled to regulate on its own without going back to the voters. So we have not had an opportunity to undertake that fairly careful study, and as a result, we are suggesting and recommending that this matter be pulled from the agenda to be tabled indefinitely until staff has had a time to investigate the history of this ordinance and to determine whether there is any room to wiggle in it for the council to regulate further.
Would legal want us to take any action now or when the item comes up on the agenda?
Might I suggest this, that after you've heard public comments and perform the presentation, item 4 is the opportunity to change the order of the agenda. That would be a good time to then take up the question of whether to remove this item from the agenda, and if the public wishes to address that specific issue, that is, removing it from the agenda, you would offer that opportunity to the public to discuss removing it from the agenda.
Thank you. With that, I will open comments to the public, from the public.
Good evening, Mayor Cook and council members. I'm Georgia Kelly. I live at Mitchell Way in Sonoma. I'm here tonight to let you know that the leaf blower issue is not going away. I'm sure you already realize that. But given that the City Council did not take action on the leaf blower ordinance that was prepared by the city staff and presented to the council 2 weeks ago, I'm here to suggest that the council agendize bringing back the ordinance for discussion and possible amendments or changes to it. Sonoma Neighbors Against Leaf Blowers will request meetings with most of you over the next 2 weeks to discuss possible changes or amendments to the ordinance. It has come to my attention since the last council meeting that virtually all of the ballot measures brought forth by the Sonoma City Council over the past 51 years have dealt with issues of revenue, infrastructure, and annexation, but not policy. So placing a policy issue on the ballot now is setting a dangerous precedent for future issues. Does it mean that whenever decisions are difficult or reflect a division in the community, that the council will succumb to a let the voters decide policy? That seems to be a slippery slope for deciding other difficult issues. I don't think anyone in this city wants another year of battling over the leaf blower issue. The divisions it will generate within our small community can be avoided by revisiting and discussing possible changes to the current ordinance. Unfortunately, there are some loud and offensive voices in the community, actually most who don't live in the city limits and therefore could not vote on the ballot measure anyway, have been bullying and insulting people in the Sonoma Neighbors Against Leaf Blowers group. Much of it has happened in the parking lot here. And I also know that city council members have been bullied by them and other people who may fancy themselves as local power brokers. They have also bullied council members. This behavior should neither be tolerated nor succumbed to. And I bring this behavior up for two reasons, not just that I run a peace organization, but it will only get worse if the leaf blower issue drags on for a year before it could be on a ballot. And another is I fear, but sincerely hope this fear is wrong and unfounded, that some of you may be influenced by the blowhards. So I urge the council to agendize a rediscussion of the ordinance on leaf blowers, and in the meantime, to consider how we might proceed in the most prudent manner, one that heals our community by putting an end to this discussion, and also seriously considers the health impact in our community. Which has recently seemed to have taken a back seat. So I'd like to propose that you revisit this, to put on the agenda that we look at the ordinance again. We'll be speaking with all of you. In the meantime, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Ransom. I live in Santa Rosa. I go to church in Sonoma, Sonoma United Methodist. Some of us are here tonight to talk to you about the families getting thrown out of the Sonoma Mission Apartments by out-of-town speculators. Because it's the most obvious illustration of the housing crisis in our community. Yes, it's happening in the Springs, but yes, there's something you can do about it, and perhaps you already have. I know you can't talk back to us at this point. Perhaps you already have put pressure on your colleagues on the Board of Supervisors to adopt rent control and for-cause eviction. Those are the legislative steps that can be taken immediately to alleviate the housing crisis. We already have rent control in the city and the county, rent control for mobile homes, and we see that it too is under attack. We stand with our friends and neighbors in mobile homes on that issue. And things are likely to get worse if the moneyed interests have their way in Sonoma City and County. I don't know how to break this to you easily. Maybe you've already seen the article. But this week's North Bay Business Journal, one of Darius Anderson's publications, promotes a detailed proposal to the state by a well-connected group to build a world-class equestrian park and event center on 750 acres at the Sonoma Development Center. I'm not joking. While thousands of local residents are homeless or nearly homeless or are paying far more than 1/3 of their income for housing, the center's backers want to build 125 stables at the SDC for literally thousands of horses. It's not a joke. So tonight, as we have in the past, we are asking you to declare a housing state of emergency in Sonoma, to establish it as a major priority of the community. We are asking you to put rent stabilization and for-cause-only eviction on your immediate agenda before things get worse. More housing affordable by the people who work here is also a priority. But rent control and tenants' rights are immediate needs. Rezoning for boarding houses and rooming houses would also relieve things. The recent poll by the Index Tribune showed that nearly 3/4 of the respondents agreed with us that we have a housing crisis, the most lopsided poll they've ever had. And that just confirms what we've been hearing from the people who sign our petition. We sincerely look forward to helping you serve the people of this community in this crisis. Let's get it on the agenda soon.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christine Missmer. That's Missmer. I live at 564 2nd Street West. I agree with everything that Mr. Ransom has to say, for the record, and unfortunately I didn't prepare a speech. I'm just here to talk to you very plainly. There is a struggle going on in our town and in our valley. It needs to be addressed. I am a single parent. I've been a single parent for a long time. And according to rents right now, I should be making $6,000 a month. Unfortunately, being a single parent with the skill set that I have, I can't even touch that. Luckily, I'm somewhere where my rent cannot be changed at this time. And if it is, it's only within small increments. I've been homeless before. I know what it's like. It's awful. There are many people that are losing their homes, losing their apartments, and in turn moving away to take jobs in other areas because they can't afford to live here. We're losing our workforce. Now, when I say workforce, I'm talking about the people on the other side of the counter when you're at the grocery store, your deli clerk, your pharmacies, your technicians at the hospital, people who work at our restaurants. These are all people that we depend upon. Our hotel industry, it needs these people to perform these tasks so that we can continue to have the tourism come into our area so that our town and our valley can benefit from it. It's not happening. It's not happening. Our people aren't being supported. Something needs to be done about it, and it needs to be done now. It can't wait. There are families counting on you. Please, please put it on the agenda to address our housing situation. We need you. We need decisive action. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Eicher, 1110 Loma Court. I wasn't going to talk about this, but one of the things that help people afford housing is to increase the minimum wage. The city council has requested to put that on the up for a study over a year ago. The study's not been done because the money has not been allocated, so you should push forward with that in one way or another, get that done. Now on to what I was going to talk about, and it appears we already have an unintended consequence of a ballot measure in '92 that the city council may not be able to adjust the way it sees fit. So putting another ballot measure now, maybe in 20 years ago, the city council then would want to make adjustments to a leaf blower measure, but wouldn't be able to. So I encourage you to revisit it and to at least put on the agenda what you can agree to now. It may not be everything. It may just be some of the things which Councilmember Hendry was concerned about, the restricted blowing debris in the neighbor's property or the further restricting days and hours. In any case, in the last meeting, the city council took no action on the ordinance that was before it. The only motion that the city council passed was to agendize putting the leaf blower measure on the ballot, which passed 5-0. So I received a copy of the Rosenberg's Rule of Orders from the Planning Director Goodison, who said that the City Council uses it for procedures. And in there is a tenet of finality and rules governing a motion to reconsider. But since no action was taken, the leaf ordinance can come back to the City Council since there was no finality. This would be the same as when there was no action regarding appointments to the Planning Commission because one council member was absent. All motions died because of 2-2 votes. Even if the motion to agendize considering the ballot measure was an action, then at the next meeting, any one of the council members who was in the majority, all of you were, can request a reconsideration. So at least you can get back on the ballot those items that you may all agree to and get that done now rather than waiting for a measure to come up before the voters. And also, I would like to see the city purchasing electric leaf blowers at this time, setting a precedence at least on that matter, instead of purchasing any more gas-powered leaf blowers going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Past Mayor Brown, 3 times.
Mr. Cook. Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street. I agree with everything Mr. Ransom spoke about, that you should agendize rent control for a upcoming agenda really soon. I would also like to make a dedication. We lost one of our firefighters recently, a young man that I've known for a very long time, Lena Sotile, Sottile. And there'll be a service at the Vets Building November 8th. And I hope that you guys come. Lena was a good citizen of Sonoma, and he deserves to be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Is there any other members of the public that would wish to speak? Seeing none, I will go ahead and close public comment and move to meeting dedications. Is there any council members that would like to? I would like to dedicate this meeting to our firefighter, Leno, and urge all council members and public to go to the memorial. With that, we have a presentation by the Sonoma County Water Agency, SCWA, regarding their proposed sewer lateral regulations. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin Booker from the Water Agency will make this presentation on their upcoming sewer lateral regulations.
Oh, good evening, Mayor Cook and City Council members. As you can see, I'm Kevin Booker. I'm with the Sonoma County Water Agency. And as you know, the Sonoma County Water Agency actually operates the Sonoma Valley County Sanitation District. So today or tonight, what I'm going to do is just really talk about a proposed code revision to the sanitation ordinance. It's early on, so this is really just not really even an update. It's sort of a beginning of what we're going to do. Let's see if I can get this right. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you what we consider as a typical sewer layout and definitions. So as I go through the presentation, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to hit on what the responsibilities of a homeowner or a commercial property, what their responsibilities are under the sanitation ordinance, and then talk about what's district's responsibilities. And then I'm going to sort of hit on why we're doing this amendment. And then it's not really a public process, but the process we're going to go through with this, and then conclude. So what you see on the screen is what we consider as a typical sewer layout. And the definitions in our ordinance is the building sewer, which is from the property, from the house or the building to the property line. And then from the property line to the sewer main itself is called the lateral sewer. And then the whole thing's called the side sewer. And then this just gives you some examples of what could go wrong with the sewer lateral. So roots, cracks. And we also talk about inflow and infiltration. There's some areas where we've seen where someone has connected their roof leader to their clean out, which goes directly into the sewer system. And then also there's places where you'll see someone's landscaping is sloped back to the clean out. And the same thing happens where, runoff can get into the sewer system. So right now, under the current sanitation ordinance, a user is responsible for maintaining the entire side sewer. So the building sewer and the lateral sewer is the homeowner's responsibility. And what the ordinance says is it's their responsibility to keep it clean and unobstructed flow. In terms of the district's responsibility is the lateral sewer, the lower piece. So if a homeowner were to video his lateral, let's say he's seen cracks in the building sewer and the lateral sewer, it would be the district's responsibility to go in there and fix the lateral sewer. But it's the homeowner's responsibility to fix the building sewer. And again, it's the homeowner's responsibility to keep the whole thing, the whole site sewer free from obstruction. So why we're doing this? There's several reasons. The first three you see on your slide are the obvious reasons. It's to reduce I&I into the system. If you reduce I&I into the system, you essentially reduce treatment costs. You reduce costs that you have to put into maintaining the collection system. The other reasons why we're doing this is the district received a cease and desist order from the regional board. And it covers sanitary sewer overflows from 2010 through 2015. At the same time that was happening, California River Watch sued us as well. And so as a part of the stipulation in their agreement with the district, we would also bring a proposed ordinance to the district's board for consideration. And again, the two stipulations in both agreements is we just have to bring it to the board's district for consideration. It doesn't say the board has to adopt it. We are going to model whatever we propose based on what's happening in Region 2. So Sonoma Valley falls under the San Francisco Bay Regional Board. And under that jurisdiction, there's 19 agencies within that area that have ordinances, and there's a few there. There's a bunch other there, all throughout Marin County, Alameda, San Francisco, so forth. What you see on the screen are just some of the triggers we're going to present to the public and say, these are the triggers that are out there, and we want to get their thoughts on what they are. The previous 19 agencies that I showed you, they all have them. They all have point of sale. They all have when a home is being remodeled, or if a home changes something, its meter or its lateral sides. All those are triggers that will require them to test their lateral. And one of the things we're going to do is you test your lateral first. And under the water agency, we have sanitation standards that has two standards that you can follow, either a pressure test or a water test. If it holds, you're done. You just present the results to us. You don't have to repair or anything. If it fails, we'll probably require the homeowner to video it to see where the problem's at. And again, like I said earlier, if it falls under the lateral sewer, it'll be the district's responsibility. Under the building sewer, it'll be the homeowner's responsibility. And as I mentioned, what we're going to do is we're going to hold two public meetings out here. We're going to hold them after the holidays to see if we get more people attending the meetings. We're going to present the triggers to the public, and then once that's done, we'll probably draft up a proposed ordinance, bring it back to your staff to make sure that we're sort of in line with what they're doing, and then also with the city or with the county. And then once that's done, we'll sort of formalize what we're going to take to the board. And then we'll probably look to take the ordinance to the board in July. Per the stipulation agreement with the regional board, we have to take it before August 1st. So that's really our plan in a nutshell. The last slide I've already covered. So that's basically what we're looking to do in the coming months. And that was all that I had.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Vice Mayor Gallion.
So one of the reasons that this is being presented is because of the cease and desist order. Now, is that correct, or is it Or is this something that was planned by the sanitation district to be doing in a course of so many years?
No. So the main driver is the cease and desist order and the Riverwatch lawsuit. That is true. We did look at doing a similar ordinance back in '08, but it didn't pass the board.
Is there any priority as to an age of a home right now? Or is it basically like some might be chosen to be tested because of age or issues, or what's the story like? What would I be looking for if it came in my mailbox?
All right, so what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the age of the home. One of the things we're researching right now is, I want to say about in probably the mid-'70s, PVC became more popular at installing versus the clay. And where I live right now, my home was built in '63. Neighbor is actually digging up his, and he has clay pipe with root intrusion. So what we're going to look at is, when did PVC really start coming onto the market, and potentially saying, okay, PVC lasts a long time. We might pick a date and start targeting homes built from a certain date and prior. Maybe start targeting those first.
Okay. And then you would be working with the homeowner for all of the testing process, is that correct?
Yeah. We'll come up with a process for a homeowner to follow in order to meet the ordinance.
Right. This seems like I'm just saying, for some people, this could be a real financial hardship. And I would be looking to see if you were in discussion on a public meeting, maybe some mitigations that you might have as far as financing techniques are concerned.
One of the things, I'm sorry.
Well, no, go right ahead.
So one of the things we're going to do, also as part of the agreement with the regional board, is essentially have a bucket of money that a homeowner could come in and get reimbursement for replacement of their lateral, repair or replacement of the lateral. And it'll probably be up to about $1,700 that they can get reimbursed for repair or rehab of their lateral.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Edwards?
Kevin, can you tell me what it costs for a pressure test? Do you have an idea, or a video test?
Yeah, so
To add on to it.
Sure. So back in '08, when we looked at this, we called 25 plumber agent or companies in the area, and we asked them what would it cost. And at the time, their cost was about $500
For
to do the air test.
air test.
So if you account for inflation, I would say that might be up to about $700.
Okay, and a video test?
So for the video, what we didn't ask for the video. We asked for also repair. What would it cost to repair a lateral? We gave them a certain scenario, same scenario to all companies, so that we can get a comparable answer. And for pipe bursting, it was around, at the time, about $4,500. And for actual, to excavate and dig it up was about $6,000.
And can you tell me if what your experience is in Sonoma Valley of how many properties have failed systems, or do you have any sense of that?
No, because we typically don't video the lateral and stuff we do. Stuff we do typically is the sewer main that we video.
Thank you.
Is there any other council member questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thanks.
With that, we'll move to the consent calendar, agenda order of the City Council. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I would like to go ahead and take Attorney Jeff Walters' recommendation that we remove item 8B.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, I will open that up to public for any discussion on the removal of item 8B as discussed by the attorney at the beginning of the meeting. Seeing none, I will bring it back to council. Councilmember Agramonte?
Mr. Mayor, if
we could, if our attorney could repeat the reason why we're doing this, because we do have new members of the public here.
If we could have the attorney do that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 8B involves discussion and seeking direction from the council as to how to amend Chapter 7.24 of the Municipal Code, which is the chapter that regulates smoking in the city of Sonoma. We discovered earlier today, in the middle portion of the day, that this ordinance, this chapter, was adopted by the electorate as an initiative in 1992. And as such, it cannot be amended without the amendments being returned to the voters at an upcoming election. However, there may be, because of the way it's drafted, and it was drafted, we believe, back in 1992, as it was drafted, there may be areas where it does not cover smoking, the type of product that can be smoked, or areas in which smoking can be regulated or prohibited. And we need, the staff does, to take a closer look at the ordinance to see if there are those openings, those opportunities for this council to step in and legislate. And we have not had that opportunity. We went to council and are requesting that the council drop the matter from tonight's agenda to give the staff those chances, that time to look at the document in greater care. And that's the reason we're recommending it be dropped tonight from the council's agenda.
Thank you, Jeff. And with that, if there's any questions from the member of the public, I will open up public comment after that. Is there any public comment?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm Penny Bird. I live at 45 Ramon, and that's why I came, is to talk about the secondhand smoke that's in our park every day and every night and every event that I'm at. And I'm sure everybody knows that for 27 years I've been doing parties in the park, and this particular year, and I don't know why this year, it has gotten so out of control that for instance, at the Vintage Festival, I'm right in the middle of the kids zone, and there's a bachelorette party probably 25 feet from me. I've probably got 50, 60 kids all around playing games, doing what they do, and the smoke was so horrendous that my husband went out and bought 2 fans to put in my tent to blow the smoke out. It was that bad. And then I was doing a party over by the Bear Flag, and I realized that what was happening is one of the reasons why on the weekends and on the weekdays it is so bad is because when our tourists get off their buses, that's their first spot to land to light up because they can't smoke on the bus. But I'm telling you, it's really, really bad. I mean, I have kids standing in line, and the cigarette smoke on the 4th of July city party was unbelievable. And I'm the voice of the cigarette smoke in the park. And I wouldn't have left my comfortable home to come and talk about this if I didn't think it was totally relevant as to exactly how much smoke is in our park, around our kids, and around us. But it seems like no matter where I go, I'm inundated with it. And I don't know what the solution is, but I know that we're being polluted in our own town. And I work parks all over California. And this particular year, this has been the worst year in our park that I've ever noticed. And I'm sorry to come with bad news. I'm Popo. I'm not supposed to do this, but, you know, I'm the voice of the kids, and they can't get away from it. And like I said, you know, we had to buy fans on Vintage Festival because we were inundated with it. So that's my good news. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other?
Is there any questions for me?
No.
No. Oh, thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
Armando Zimmerman, 275 West Spain. I'm not having read the original ordinance or whatever, 92. I don't know whether it covers what I'd call related or collateral issues. I fully agree with the previous speaker. But I also am concerned about the the cigarette butts and all the crap that goes with packages and packaging, whatever. I'm constantly picking up stuff in front of my own house. When I take my grandkids to the to the park, especially on the bigger kids where the big swings are and whatever, I'm always picking up cigarette butts and related stuff, other trash too, but cigarette butts and whatnot. Anecdotes all over the place. Just last week, a fella pulls up on the other side of across from my house, stops his car, and then I realize, oh, he stopped his car. Oh, because he's lighting up. So then, after he lights up, he tosses the match out onto the street. Granted, that's a small piece of this whole thing, but I thought, come on, litter your own car, litter your own body, but don't be, littering the street. Cigarette butts, to me, we all know, they never disappear, apparently. And we're talking about the sewers and, and how to keep stuff out of the sewers. Well, we know where a lot of the cigarette butts go and whatnot. So, at any rate, smoking kills. And it kills people that smoke, and it kills people that don't smoke by secondhand methods. So, anything we can do to curb it or get rid of it, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the removal of 8B?
Elizabeth Emerson, a local resident. Since I work in this field, I volunteer my services to the City of Sonoma to help draft whatever language you need for any kind of initiative. I'm sure that there's some other health organizations that are here in the room that would be willing to assist as well. So my services are at your disposal.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the removal of 8B?
Good evening, I'm Lori Bremner. I live at 18583 Melody Lane. Had a business in Sonoma for about 25 years. I'm disappointed that this is coming off the agenda, is going to be delayed yet again. We've been working on this for so long, and I left a meeting early in Sacramento and drove through traffic like a crazy woman to get here in order to address this important issue. I have friends who live in multi-unit housing and share walls in condos who are being affected by people next door to them smoking on their patios, on their decks, in their homes. And my friends can't afford to move. Just because someone moves in next door and affects their kids, it affects their health. And this need is really urgent. We just can't keep putting this off. We really need to take care of it. You heard Popo talk about what happens in the plaza. It's also happening in apartments and in condos, and we just need to get this done. So I'm disappointed it's coming off. I know this council will do the right thing eventually. Forgive my impatience, but every day that you're breathing secondhand smoke is a day that your health is being harmed, and it's our kids that we need to protect. So I will thank you to try to get this back on the agenda absolutely as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Pam Granger. The hat tonight would be the Vice Chair of the Coalition for Tobacco-Free Sonoma County. If I understand right, the dilemma comes in that, and this is very unusual, so 16 years, and this combination of the fact that the policy was passed by the community and then how to modify it. This is a new one, and so I have nothing to do but other than my jaw, is down like, well, there's one I haven't heard, but would be very happy to help council research and see if there's a way to take elements that weren't, as was suggested, that weren't covered before. So secondhand smoke protections outdoors and in multi-unit housing were not covered in indoor smoke-free workplace law. So perhaps we can put our heads together and work that around. So I appreciate the willingness and the creativity, and because we're all supportive of that, and thank you for your previous support.
Thank you. Is there any other comment on the removal of 8B?
Gina Kuklis. Speaking for myself, although my interest in this is as a
both working with youth countywide as the Area 1 trustee and the Sonoma County Board of Education. We did something very unique this year, and that is we sponsored and sent to our high school districts, upon their request, we took a brochure that went into back-to-school packets for parents about e-cigarettes and the harm of e-cigarettes and the smoke, or whatever you want to call it. So we are concerned about the health of our youth in Sonoma County, and I also chair the county's Maternal, Child, and Adolescent Health Advisory Board. And we advise the Board of Supervisors, so I don't have any authority to advise you. So speaking for myself, if the county in our unincorporated area can have a smoking ordinance that prevents smoke inside multi-unit housing, then the city of Sonoma needs one too. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the removal of 8B? Seeing none. We have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion of the colleagues on the council? Vice Mayor Gallion.
I just want to say that that this is a relatively new development, and I am sure that staff will be working at an acceptable speed that will go ahead and actually make sure that everything is right. And it's important that this be right. This isn't about a get it done. This is about getting it right. So if we are going to go ahead and we're going to work forward on this, I would rather be based on firm foundation rather than to go ahead and put something into action that will only be challenged later. Thank you.
Councilmember Hundley.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm also disappointed that we can't talk about it tonight. I was really looking forward to getting to something that was of this level of importance, but I did spend the afternoon reading some newspaper articles from 1992 just because I wanted to see what happened. But a little trivia was that the city council had voted 2 people against having any ban, 3 sent it to the ballot, and then it ended up passing by 65%. So I think hopefully we can work on what they had and go forward.
Is there any other comments? Seeing none, City Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Could we call for a roll call vote of the removal of item 8B?
Could you please remind me who made the second?
Madeline.
Councilmember Gallion?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte? Aye. Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Cook?
Aye. For public, it was a 5-0 vote to remove 8B for further look at the possibility of it not being in the grasp of the City Council's decision due to it being on an election item. With that, we are on consent calendar. Does any colleagues on the council like to remove any item on the consent calendar? I would actually like to remove item 4D. I will go to public. Is there any public discussion on item 4A, 4B, or 4C? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council for discussion and action. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I move to approve the consent agenda for 4A, B, and C.
Second.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I will bring it to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gallion?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte? Aye. Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Cook?
Aye. For public, it was a 5-0 vote to pass 4A, 4B, and 4C on the consent calendar, which leaves 4D, which I pulled. And the only reason I pulled this item, just to let public be aware that we do shop local, and I want to thank our staff for always looking at our local vendors. Is there any discussion on 4D? Seeing none, I will take it to public for any discussion on 4D. Seeing none, I will bring it back to council for discussion and action.
Move to approve?
Second.
Is there any other discussion? City Clerk.
Councilmember Gallion?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte? Aye. Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Cook?
Aye. For public, we, as a council, 5-0 vote on the execution of a purchase agreement for a new 2016 Chevrolet Tahoe 4x4 command utility vehicle for the fire department. With that, we'll move to the consent calendar of the City Council as a Board of Appeals. Item 6A, adoption of a resolution partially granting the appeal of the July 17th, 2015 nuisance and safety violation and order issued by the City Building Department for 20141 Broadway. Is there any questions?
I have a question. Because there are special circumstances involved in this, is there a way that someone can just report back to us what's going on through this process? I think it's 60 to 90, I can't remember the amount of days. I didn't look in there. Not, just here's what's happening.
Through the mayor, staff will undertake to advise the council as to the progress of this particular order. It sets deadlines. And as those deadlines approach, we will advise you as much as we can about what's happening. And once those deadlines pass, we will then provide you an update as to what we think should be done next. This may require the staff bringing this matter back to the board, to council acting as the appeals board to take further action.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, I will open this up for public comment on item 6A. Seeing none, I will bring it back to council for discussion and action. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I move that we go ahead and move the council consent calendar agenda order the City Council as Board of Appeals.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, City Clerk, we have a motion and a second.
Councilmember Gallion?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Cook?
Aye. And for public, it was a 5-0 on item 6A, the adoption of a resolution partially granting the appeal of the July 17, 2015 nuisance and safety violation and order issued by the City Building Department. With that, we will move to the regular calendar. Item 8A, discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve the principles of developing governance options for the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Basin under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which is SGMA. Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. This issue before you is looking for possible action by motion order to approve the principles that you'll see in a presentation upcoming for developing governance options under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, but also to approve the governance skeleton framework, which you'll also receive a briefing of on the upcoming presentation. The basics of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act were brought to council back on April 6th, and this kind of follows up after several meetings of staff with the various agencies throughout the Sonoma County. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jay Jaspers, District Chief Engineer at the Water Agency.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor, council members. Pleasure to be here tonight. As Mr. Takasugi mentioned, I'm going to give you an update of the initial implementation activities of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act here in Sonoma County, but also in the rest of the county, the other two basins that this act applies to, which is Petaluma and Santa Rosa Plain. So I'll talk about where we are as the 11 agencies that are at the table now in these initial discussions on formulation of groundwater sustainability agencies, and also talk to you about some of our proposed next steps. Before I do that, just to give you a little regional context about the importance of groundwater, both here in Sonoma as well as throughout the county. This map shows the 4 largest groundwater basins in the county. Overall, Sonoma County has 14 groundwater basins that the state has identified. The 4 basins here are the largest and most heavily used, heavily populated basins. The yellow basin is Alexander Valley. The orange basin is Santa Rosa Plain. The green basin is Petaluma, and the red basin is here in Sonoma Valley. And one thing I just want to point out is the connection between the Russian River system, our region's major surface water supplies, and groundwater in these basins. And the Yellow Basin, Alexander Valley, has the Russian River going right through the groundwater basin. The other three basins, including Sonoma Valley, that linkage is provided, surface water and groundwater linkage is provided by the water agency's aqueduct system, which supplies many of the cities, including this city, most of their water supply. So it's very important to understand and manage the local groundwater resources so that we can proactively manage surface water and groundwater in more of a strategic way to improve overall reliability. Having done that, or look with that purpose in mind, I should say, the Water Agency back in 2000 started working with the U.S. Geological Survey, and we worked to conduct scientific studies in those four basins. Three of the basins, the studies have been done. Petaluma, we have 2 more years to conduct the scientific studies. After the studies were done in Santa Rosa Plain and here in Sonoma Valley, what we worked on, the water agency here in Sonoma Valley with Valley of the Moon Water District and the city and other stakeholders, is developing a voluntary groundwater management programs. And here in Sonoma Valley, we've had a very robust groundwater management program since 2007. It was the first groundwater management program in the county. It's based on AB 3030 and SB 1938 groundwater management. We're the legislative framework for groundwater management before the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which just passed last year. And so the existing programs under AB 3030 and the management that we've been conducting here in the Santa Rosa Plain are voluntary and they're non-regulatory. I'm going to describe SGMA, as it's called, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, is different. It is a regulatory framework, and our challenge, one of our challenges in implementing SGMA, is to bring that voluntary program, which we've made a lot of progress and have a lot of good programs in place, and bring that along and merge it into the new SGMA compliance or framework, which again is going to be having much higher thresholds and have a regulatory framework to it. So I just wanted to give you that background. The other thing I want to point out is that on your maps you'll see the outlines of the 3 basins, and if you look carefully at Sonoma Valley or the Santa Rosa Plain, the SGMA applies only to the boundaries of the sediment of the basins as the state has identified it, not to the whole watersheds, not up into the mountains or the higher upland areas, as you can see our voluntary management plans do. And so there is a difference in the boundaries of the existing groundwater management programs in Sonoma Valley and Santa Rosa Plain versus what SGMA has, what is prescribed in SGMA, which is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and there's an opportunity down the road to make some minor adjustments, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a subsequent slide. So SGMA has been called by many as the most important water legislation in 100 years since 1914. It's very complex legislation. There were 3 different bills that were smushed together, and out came this one statute. But basically, this slide attempts to just look at it from a very general perspective in 3 broad steps. Step 1 is to form the groundwater sustainability agencies, which I'll talk about tonight. That's where these 11 agencies are working on developing these what's called GSAs. And we have a deadline to do that of June 30th, 2017. If we miss that deadline, then per the law, the county is the default agency to perform that function. If the county is unable to perform that function, then the state will come in and take over management of the groundwater basin. Step 2 is to develop, for these groundwater sustainability agencies, to develop groundwater sustainability plans. Again, here we have an explicit deadline of January 31st, 2022. And if the locals are not able to meet that deadline, again, the state can come in and prepare and implement a groundwater sustainability plan for the basin. Finally, step 3 is once you adopt your groundwater sustainability plan, you have up to 20 years to achieve sustainability. And the next slide I'll describe what sustainability is, but you have up to 20 years, and you have to have milestones in your plan and show in that 20 years that you're tracking along to meet your targets and your goals. Now, you can do that sooner. You can achieve sustainability sooner, but you have up to 20 years per the law. So Sigma attempts to define this word sustainability, which is used in many different ways and in different contexts. And here what it means is preventing undesirable results. And undesirable results are looked at through 6 lenses here, and those are those orange boxes or those reddish boxes at the bottom. If you have lowering of groundwater levels over a sustained period of time, if you have a reduction of groundwater storage in your aquifer over a sustained period of time, if you have seawater intrusion moving into your freshwater aquifers, if you have other water quality degradation, or if you have land subsidence. In some areas of the Central Valley now, they're experiencing over a foot a year of the ground subsiding due to groundwater pumping. That's not happening here to any that we know of, but it's a significant issue in the Central Valley. And then the final one is depletion of surface water. So groundwater pumping can deplete surface water, which can impair sensitive ecosystems and habitat in streams and tributaries. So this is how Sigma looks at and what your groundwater sustainability plans will have to mitigate against if you have any of these issues going on. Here in Sonoma Valley, we do have some of these, lowering of groundwater levels. We have saline water intrusion and reduction of groundwater storage and depletions of surface water flows. So we do have significant groundwater issues. As you know, we've been here before, and we and staff have presented some of the results of the groundwater management plan. So what are we doing in these early stages of implementing Sigma? As Dan mentioned, there's 11 agencies that are working together across the 3 basins to really identify how these groundwater sustainability agencies should be formed. We've hired a facilitator from the Consensus Building Institute. She has conducted a stakeholder assessment of all of the agencies and other groundwater users or representatives from other groundwater users and constituencies to really identify the issues in the context of what we have to do with forming these groundwater sustainability agencies. We've done a lot of outreach, including our basin advisory panels on our groundwater management programs. And received input from those basin advisory panels on the from the existing groundwater management programs. And we formed this agency staff working group of 11 agencies, and we developed some draft principles that staff agreed to that I'll present in a slide forthcoming, and also some governance options that I'll talk about, as well as an outreach plan. And then we've also have planned for some workshops for the next, for the first outreach activities in November and December. So these are the general principles that staff have agreed to in terms of developing GSA governance. And so this is what we believe is important, these principles to follow as we form these GSAs. And again, we have this deadline of June 30th, 2017 to form a GSA. These principles are building upon the existing cooperation and successful water managements that are already occurring, as I mentioned, reinforcing local management, not having the state come in for us, but really taking control locally of our resource, sharing our resources to be efficient, sharing the costs equitably, representing community stakeholders through advisory committees. So once you form a GSA, continuing that program that we already have of basin advisory panels or some form of advisory panels working with the GSAs into the future, and then also conducting transparent outreach programs along the way. So the first step for forming these GSAs, and this is from the law itself, a local agency or a combination of local agencies have the authority to form the GSAs. And it's very specific what a local agency is. It's any public agency that does one of three things, or any of three things: supplies water, manages water, or controls land use. So the city of Sonoma is one GSA eligible agency. The water agency is another one. All told, across the three basins, Santa Rosa Plain, Petaluma, and Sonoma Valley, there's 11 agencies, and there are 5 here in the, as you'll see in another slide, 5 here in the Sonoma Valley. Again, as I mentioned, the counties are the default GSA in unmanaged areas. So this slide just shows that what I just said is how it breaks out with the different agencies involved in each of the 3 basins. The Sonoma Valley's on the right side there. The City of Sonoma, the North Bay Water District, which is in the Carneros area for agricultural irrigation district or water district. The Valley of the Moon Water District, Sonoma County, and the Sonoma County Water Agency. So Sonoma County and the Sonoma County Water Agency are in all 3 of the basins, given our range of responsibilities, our jurisdictional range. Well, what do these GSAs have the authority to do? They have some pretty significant authorities. They can conduct studies, they can register and monitor wells, they can set well spacing requirements. They can require reporting of pumping of groundwater levels. They can regulate how much you pump out of your well. They can build, finance, and implement capital projects, pipelines, or whatever is needed to achieve sustainability of groundwater, and they can assess fees to cover those costs. So there's fairly significant authorities here. I do point out, though, these are discretionary authorities. So the GSA does not have to utilize all of these authorities, but they do need to exercise those authorities if they're needed to achieve sustainability, because if they don't, they fail to do that, and you don't achieve sustainability, then the state will come in and take over management of your basin. So with that in mind, staff has been looking at what kind of configurations for a GSA, because the SIGMA provides you lots of options. And so one of the options is to have one GSA per each of the basins. So one for Petaluma, one here in Sonoma, and one in the Santa Rosa Plain. It really is probably the simplest form of direct representation. So there's some positives there, but also there's some possibilities of funding competition amongst the basins. Our groundwater basins are fairly small, and we're going to be competing with other parts of the state that have much larger groundwater basins. And so, if we can realize a way that we can band together strategically to get resources in to support these programs for state funding, that would be advantageous. Also, if we could be more efficient through common activities and do those together across the basins, that would be efficient. So 180 degrees from 3 separate basins is have one county-wide groundwater sustainability agencies. And that would have some of the advantages of regionalizing the effort, but at the same time, you lose that advantage of having more of a direct representation of what's going on in your basin. Having people in Petaluma or entities in Petaluma decide some programs here in Sonoma Valley or vice versa is probably not desirable for anybody. And so that was also looked at, and I think that was discarded and by all staff. What we ended up with really on consensus is, let me see, whoops. We're supposed to be, I think this slide got cut off a little bit, but the third option was a hybrid of these two. And it really is taking 3 basins and separate individual GSAs in each of the basins, like the first option. But then, and then forming some sort of a formal communication or coordination mechanism between the three agencies. And so staff unanimously agreed to this general concept, having one GSA in each of the three basins with one plan in each of the three basins, and then having some form of formal coordination. We did not agree as to what that coordination should be. Should it be its own separate entity, or should it be through a coordination agreement like an MOA? All of that is to be decided down the road, but we did come to this agreement as the skeletal structure for the program. So the next steps, as we are tonight, all 11 agencies, and you can see the dates here, are going to their respective councils and boards to get direction on the principles as well as the skeletal structure. And then as we move through that, and I think the last one is in November 2nd in Petaluma. After we do that, we're going to move on to outreach. And so we have also developed the staff from the 11 agencies has outreach subcommittee that's working on an outreach plan. And so we want to, as we move forward through June 2017 to get our GSAs developed, we have to have integrated into that specific outreach programs. So we're informing folks, the public, and we're also receiving input as we move forward in our discussions on these GSAs. So another item there on the schedule, the second box, is basin boundaries. This is nothing we're looking for direction tonight, but this is something that the group is working on. There will be a window, a 3-month window that opens up from the state where they will allow entities, local agencies, such as the city or the water agency, to ask for some adjustments to the basin boundaries. Their rules and regulations are just getting formulated from the state right now. They're fairly limited in what they will allow, but we are studying that, and with staff we'll be looking at if there's any options here for recommendation in Sonoma Valley. And you can just look through the rest of the schedule that gets us to June 30th, 2017. We're going to be working now as staff starting in November on things like voting options, representation. We have an attorneys work group now looking at legal mechanisms, JPAs versus MOUs, etc. Basin boundaries, funding, allocation, all of those fun details. So we'll be working on those. And we're hoping by next fall we'll have this skeletal structure framed out with those issues, recommendations on those issues too. We'll be continuing to have at strategic points outreach and workshops. Speaking of outreach, the GSAs have to, this is from the SGMA legislation itself, they have to consider all interests of beneficial uses and users of groundwater. And you can see the different, well, again, it got cut off there, but there's several stakeholder groups that we have to outreach to. And so we are doing that. And we have, as I mentioned, 3 workshops planned for November and December. Sonoma Valley's in the middle there. November 12th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Vets Hall. And any questions, we have a new website, a new domain we got. It's sonomacountygroundwater.org. You can go there and get all kinds of information, both locally and the state. You can also click and get on an email list for any new developments to the program. And with that, I'd turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Jay. As I mentioned earlier, Council, we will be looking for a motion order to approve the principles for developing the governance options, and also to approve the governance framework that you saw with the three different basins, each having a GSA and a groundwater sustainability plan, and with some cooperation amongst the 3 basins.
Thank you. Is there any council member Hunley?
So since the city of Sonoma is technically an agency, what would be our role in it? Are we sort of like handing it over to the water agencies to do, or I know you're still figuring out what the votes would look like. So would Sonoma have like a seat at the table, or?
Yeah, under the skeletal governance framework, it would appear that all the 5 entities within Sonoma Valley would form either a JPA or come together under an MOA of some sort to create this GSA.
So then there'd be 2 levels of agreements. First would be the 5 of us together, and then there would be the larger one between the 3 groups working together.
I think the one larger between the 3 groups would be much looser. Probably might be a very simple MOU, but that's not as regulatory, but just cooperating amongst the 3 basins, sharing information, sharing resources.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. Just in general, so what's the overlap between the GSAs and like development policy as far as like future developments, and is that going to affect it, or is it just like could people still develop but then they just can't use the water?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there was in terms of land use, there was a battle back and forth in Sacramento. The original legislation had these GSAs responsible for land use, at least well permitting and well permitting programs. And there was a back and forth with the counties and the cities against the water agencies who had the initial language. Bottom line was that language was stripped out. The cities and the county maintain their land use authorities, and SGMA does not touch that. In addition, the county still maintains administration of the well permitting program. That said, and SGMA also adds a lot of words about coordination, and there's certain things that GSA has to do to inform about data and the plans that come into place from the GSA's perspective, the groundwater sustainability plans, and the county and the city have to consider those information or those data in their general plans or any general plan amendments. They don't have to agree to them, but they have to consider them. And so there's a back and forth. Some coordination's required, although it's, to be honest, a big mystery to most of us across the state how that's going to play out. My conclusion is that where land use planners and groundwater managers and groundwater planners work well together, this will enhance that. But in some parts of the state, that's not so. That relationship isn't so close, and that'll be interesting to follow. I think there's now more questions in those parts of the state.
My last question is, with the whole priority, medium or high, I understand that we're medium now, but if one of the 3 basins got bumped up to high, would that shift anything within the power structure or interests?
No, it wouldn't shift anything in terms of timelines now, because even if one of the basins was moved from medium to high, we're kind of on the clock now is in the deadlines. If you were a high basin to begin with, you'd have to have your groundwater sustainability plan done in 2020, 2 years earlier, but they can't change the rules on you now. So
that's mainly a timeline thing, the high designation?
A timeline from SGMA, and there's another factor here, not to complicate it, but the state has recently come out with basins of conditions of critical overdraft. And for those basins, they also have the 2-year earlier window deadline, and they actually have special funding that they're being prioritized for from Prop 1 to help address some of their issues.
Vice Mayor Gallion.
So there's another consideration here, that we have in our fact sheet, and that's if anyone determined that they weren't going to go with the principles, and I assume all of the 5 groups on our particular basin are being queried for that, what would happen if one of them decided to opt out and said they weren't in agreement?
Well, that's a good question. We'd have to go back as staff and discuss basically the ramifications of that. And do we hold the process, getting into those other issues, the meaty issues, and have to rework some of the principals if we had to. That's a possibility. I should also point out that any of the 11 agencies can decide they don't want to be a GSA. They'll let the others deal with it, and that's fine. That's perfectly adequate. On the other side, each one of the local agencies can decide they want to be their own GSA. So Sonoma Valley could presumably have up to 5 GSAs. Now, there's parts of the Central Valley that are looking at those kinds of things, and it's allowed, but it's what the law does is you then have to have all kinds of coordination agreements amongst yourselves, and it become pretty onerous. So there's options both ways.
Well, I think the repercussions would be seen, in the very beginning, and then just would continue to snowball with the competition, because I have seen that with our water dollars and, water bond measures and other things like that. So then the pie becomes even smaller because you have groundwater and then you would have regular water. So it's better to be on some common page to begin with, knowing the end in mind there.
Is there any other, Councilmember Agramonte?
Thank you, yes, and this is the second time I've heard this presentation. I'm on the North Bay Watershed Association, and I'm just always so interested in the presentations that the association has. And Dan suggests, I think you were saying, the 3 basins with their GSAs, and it seems as if above that is really a clearinghouse. It's not necessarily an authority of any kind, because I think the Watershed Association was getting a little nervous, about some of that. But I think your suggestion, I wanted to share it with the council. It seemed as if that was, they don't vote, but it's informative. But I thought the discussion went around that. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. At this time, I will open up public comment on this item. And I have granted 4 minutes for.
Great, thank you. Hi, Carla Noyes, 15549 Brookview Drive. I sit on the Groundwater TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, and the Basin Advisory Panel, and I just want to let you know that the participants from the Water Agency are a group of bright young engineers who are a pleasure to work with, which I'm sure reflects the professionalism of their managers. We are lucky to have these very good people. No doubt you've heard George McHale and Arthur Dawson report that 192 years ago, Father Jose Altamira, the founder of our San Francisco Solano mission, described Sonoma as a fountain of fountains, because there were so many artesian wells here. We can imagine that for millennia, there was a plume of fresh water sustaining the diverse life of the wetlands flowing out into the San Pablo Bay. Today, we have saltwater intrusion 8 miles inland to Shug Winery and 2 zones of depletion where the water table is below sea level, which is sucking salt water further inland. In addition, we have falling water table that is causing the downcutting of our creeks, waterways that used to teem with steelhead. Environmental engineer Alice Outwater, in her book Water, A Natural History, describes how the buffalo were hunted to near extinction because no one owned them. No one owns the groundwater, and it is being consumed as fast as possible with new well construction at an all-time high. Thankfully, we have this sustainable groundwater management process, which has a rather long timetable for implementation, 2022, but there's no reason we cannot implement it sooner. This past spring, I attended a climate action workshop at Sonoma State University. The scientists told us that the computer models predict that in 37 years, Sonoma County will experience an average of 90 days over 90-degree temperatures. 3 months of over 90-degree temperatures. Kind of like this year. Our hottest summer on record. What will be the demand on groundwater at that time? In order to mitigate and reverse climate change, we need to be driving electric cars and installing solar panels everywhere. To protect the groundwater, we need meters installed on every one of the 2,500 wells in Sonoma Valley. You can't improve what you don't measure. Water conservation is the new normal. There needs to be state-of-the-art water conservation at every vineyard, winery, business, and home. One El Nino is not going to solve our problem. And two, I have a concern that our creeks are managed like drainage ditches, causing additional problems. Until the as yet unformed Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency determines the sustainable draw on our water table, there needs to be a complete moratorium on all new well construction. Because what happens if we don't do any of these things? I can tell you, we won't be calling this wine country anymore, and property values are likely to suffer unless we take prompt action. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council for discussion and action. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I would just like to say that this was a very impressive presentation. Thank you very much for taking a very confusing subject from all that I've been reading and trying to go ahead and scale it down to something that we can start to work on. And I look at this as just a start. There will be many roads ahead, and I know that this is, for the good of the state. I know it's for the good of the county. And I, for one, would like to propose a motion to approve the principles for developing governance options for the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Basin under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I'm looking for a second. Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Gallion, if I could, we were hoping to also approve the framework, the skeletal framework of the options, if we could amend that.
I would like to amend that to also include the skeletal framework. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Hunley?
I also thought this presentation was very informative, and it's nice to be able to, I know you all have been working on this underground for a while, but it's nice to be able to hear about it, and because it is something that's so important. But I think that the principles are inspiring, and the structure with one GSA per basin, but everyone working together to hopefully get bigger pools of money and work that way is the smart way to go. And I think that Sonoma, being as small as it is, we need to work with our neighbors on this one. So I also support the motion.
And I will just say that water is important. When we get government involved, I would like to see through this process at least to have elected officials where they're responsible, so it's not just the government staff through the whole process. With that, I'm always for local control. I believe that going with any way through this process where the city of Sonoma and the Valley of Sonoma, since we're actually part of, that's a part of our sphere of influence, that they actually have as much votes as the others. So I would like to have that segregated as much as we could through the process. But with that said, I do agree with Councilmember or Vice Mayor Gallion. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, City Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Could I call for a roll call vote?
Councilmember Gallion?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Cook?
Aye. With public, we actually passed item 8A 5-0. With that, we are done. And for public, I just wanted to say that item 8B has been removed from the agenda and won't be spoke tonight until looked at by legal and staff. With that, council members' reports and comments. Is there any reports or comments from my colleagues on the council?
I have some. Oh, go ahead.
Councilmember Hunley?
Last week, we had the Sonoma County Mayors and Council Members Legislative Committee, and Sonoma had the honor of hosting the meeting, and we had two special guests, Assemblymember Mark Levine and Senator Lois Wolk, and they met right here at our Emergency Operations Center, and we had a chance to hear about what they're working on, especially with the most recent legislative session, and a chance to talk to them about what's going on in our lives. So it was nice to have them in our neck of the woods, and everyone said the same thing, that they felt fortunate to be able to drive to Sonoma to work that day.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Thank you. Well, firstly, I just wanted to let everyone know that my office hours are going to now be from 10:30 to 11:30 because I am involved in training my new dog, and so I won't be there at the other hours, 11 to noon, but 10:30 to 11:30 is fine. That's every Tuesday. On October 14th, I attended the Impact 100 presentation regarding nonprofits and how they apply for the grants that are available through Impact 100. I also attended the ACE meeting at Hannah, and it's really an interesting concept. It's a study by Kaiser Permanente of 1,700 people, and the ACE study has to do with the trauma that affects children as they grow up to adults, and it has to do with their lives, how their lives are following up, how those affect lives. Hannah has said that, I see it as a new management at Hannah, and they're saying even though we're in Sonoma, we're not of Sonoma, and they are trying to be more and more of Sonoma, which I appreciate. And as well, they would like to possibly become a training center for the ACE study for facilities throughout the United States. That I think that's really something that's interesting. Also, at the Loop here on the plaza, they had an event for Sonoma Splash, and they had a raffle, and I won a purse. I'm
Good.
so excited. The last time I won anything was when I was 8 years old, and I won pop beads. So I want everyone to be happy for me. Thank you.
Just report that to the FPPC. Vice Mayor Gallion.
Yes. Well, it's going to be hard to top that one. Okay. I did attend the meeting of the Sonoma County Transportation Authority and the Regional Climate Protection Authority. And as you see with the signing of Governor Brown to some of the state's objectives for climate change, we are incentivizing the electric vehicles and charging stations as one of our objectives for the state itself. So we talked about electric vehicles, and we talked about some of the options that might be available for us. And I just wanted to say that we heard at mayors and council members meeting that Sebastopol is holding an all-electric showcase. And they are inviting all-electric cars, bicycles, all of these vehicles in order to urge, more people to get acquainted with what electric conveyances might look like. So I imagine it's going to be quite a show. So that is coming up. So unfortunately, I don't remember the date. I know that it's soon, and you could check their website for that information. But for us, we looked very much about strategies, and this was tied in later with the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, as we learned the astronomical amount that most families have to spend in a month out of their budget to go ahead and pay for transportation in the county. And this is a lot of money. This is anywhere upwards of, $700 to $800 to even $900 a month, depending upon the vehicles that are there. This was a survey that was put on the website. It did have responses to it. It is currently, out for report on the Transportation Authority as well. But the cost of owning a vehicle, maintaining a vehicle, paying for gas, and what that budget is a huge amount out of what is a moderate income family. And again, tacking on our affordable housing costs and whatever, this is obviously a big concern and one that we're looking to address. So stay tuned, there'll be more on that. I think the highlight of the day certainly took up a generous amount of time in conversation was the Memorandum of Understanding related to advancing improvements in the Highway 37 corridor. This particular document, is quite extensive as to what this particular group might have the ability to research. And we'll be getting more details as to what the selections will be. But basically, each transportation authority, and that would be from Napa, Solano, Marin, as well as Sonoma, are coming together to their transportation authorities and saying, can we build an MOU where we can start to discuss what we're going to do for the future of Highway 37 with sea level rise, toll roads. You've heard some of the discussions about this already in the paper. So stay tuned on that. The representatives that we have that have been attending that meeting has been Supervisor David Rabbit, and we have been getting reports. And I, of course, expressed that I wanted to have the city managers read in on this and be able to advise councils as to what actions were going forward and what the objective was going to be, because it is quite an extensive undertaking for 4 counties to do this. And I just want to make sure that this is something that we start out right to begin with. And I'm glad that that meeting is being called. All right, I went to the Marin, Sonoma, Mosquito, and Vector Control District, and who knew that there is absolutely no days left in the education program from K to 12 that they have with their technologist going out to schools. They are booked solid with bringing out mosquito fish and mosquitoes, having the little, I would say the controlled area where the mosquitoes are in, and kids are loving it. And they're going back and they're telling their parents that there's standing water in the backyard and they tip over those buckets, okay, and get rid of that water that might be standing out, and understand the importance, and they're just wonderful with their impact. So stay tuned. You'll probably see a lot of artwork. They were celebrating their 100-year level, and this is a wonderful project where they actually had students do journals and they talked about different insects. And there's a service, which I did not know, but it's if you identify a bug and you've never seen this before, can't find it anywhere, they will actually go ahead and you send them a picture on an email and they'll go ahead and try to identify it, for you. So this is a wonderful component of that particular district, and as I go along, I'm sure I'm going to find out more. So that right there, I think I attended the pancake breakfast for the Sonoma Valley Fire and Rescue Authority. It was packed. It was a great representation, and there were lines. I walked in at 9:30. There were lines to even get the breakfast. There were lines to go out on the fire engines. They did the Jaws of Life demonstration, and they were even showing how they rescued horses, which was just a fascinating experience. So I know there were a lot of happy children, okay, on Sunday morning. Just wanted to put a shout out for a happy Halloween, happy and safe Halloween, that's coming up. And also our time change will be happening at that point. And that I have registered for the November 1 cemetery walk with Fred Allerbeck. And although I'm just digress to a short anecdote here, when I became a member of the cemetery committee, I decided I really needed to know what I was talking about, so perhaps maybe I needed to visit every cemetery. And I went up to the mountain cemetery, and I was gone for probably 3.5 hours, right? I didn't tell my husband, didn't tell anybody, did it all by myself alone. It was only after I came down that I found out from a member of staff that there's bobcats up there, right? And that I should never go there alone. So I've been kind of like reluctant to really, endeavor to do this. So having a group, having the level of expertise in the historical realm, I'm looking forward to, and I know that Fred is an excellent speaker and that I will be well entertained. So with that, I conclude.
With that, I attended the Mayors and Council in Santa Rosa last week with Vice Mayor Gallion, who was my safe ride, even though I had a glass of wine, but thank you for that. I appreciate it. I don't know how safe it was, but...
Oh, well, that's not good.
And I would like to report on the library. The nice thing in the county-wide is Roseland is opening up a library on a kind of experimental for a small period of time. Hopefully that'll continue. And I've talked to the Friends of the Library here in Sonoma and hoping to get some of our friends, as we know our library does really good with our book sales, and try to help those folks. So that will continue with the library there in Roseland. And with that, I will be at Sonoma Clean Power on Thursday at 8:45 as Board of Director. And other than that, that's all I have to report. City Manager?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cook. We'd like to unveil tonight the first of our new historical street signs, which are, I think they're wonderful. And these are going to start going up around the plaza. Wow. I know, aren't they great? So.
I don't know if I like that brown.
We didn't hear that. Anyway, we wanted to bring them tonight to show you. I think they're just amazing. So these will start. You'll see these start going up. So we wanted to bring them and show you tonight. So that's happening. Our LED streetlights project is also underway. So these are two of your council goals, and so we're making some really great progress with making our town look even better than it already does. And so we wanted to show those to you tonight. Also, Public Works staff has been busy working on getting the city-maintained channels ready for, hopefully, El Nino, where flooding has been known to exist in the past when those rains come. And they've been cleaning out hundreds of street storm drain inlets in preparation of the rainy season. So we're going to be ready. I can't say enough about our Public Works Department. So I always like to give them kudos when I can. So they do a great job. Last Thursday, we did the Great Shakeout Emergency Preparedness Drill that all of our department managers and some of our mid-management staff participated in that. It was led by our fire department, and that went really well. And also really pleased to announce that we also are recipients of a Homeland Security grant that is going to allow us to purchase 10 laptops for our EOC and emergency preparedness. This is one of the issues that we've kind of been lacking on is our computers in the EOC, which are the old PC computers, much like what you saw happen here. That's kind of what happens, or the type of computers that we have in our EOC. So I have to give a shout out to our fire chief, Mark Freeman, and our police chief, Brett Sackett, who went and applied for Homeland Security grant and secured funding for 10 laptops. And this was one of the things that we learned as a result of the Napa earthquake, and the city manager of Napa who talked about having laptops and the portability of that. So I really appreciate our fire chief and our police chief taking that forward and getting us funding for laptops. So that's something that we will be working on and purchasing laptops for our EOC. So that concludes my report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. At this time, I will open up public comment. Is there any public comment?
Robert Demler, First Street West, Sonoma. Thank you, Dan, for pulling me out from outside. I was leaving. The signs are wonderful. Thank you to all of you.
And thank you, Robert, for helping with that. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 7:38.